Museum. My name is Kim Pinder. I think many of you know who I am. I'm the interim director of the UNM Art Museum as well as the Dean of the College of Fine Arts. And before I get started on thanking everyone here up on stage, I also want to make sure that I thank Aileen and Walter Clewino, who are our proud sponsors of our Insights lecture series. And they have been giving generously so we can have such great programs as we have tonight. And speaking of that, first I've been told that I should explain why you all are sitting in a very weird configuration as opposed to being upstairs where we have a friendlier lecture space. And this is really a bee that I had in my bonnet as the curator of this show. I created this particular little room here based, if you look at the label, roughly on kind of 1.5 rooms that were in the Abrams home, where a number of works that you see here were on display there. And that was part of my challenge and my really joy that I had being able to curate this show. It was a real honor, something that kind of fell into my lap as I became interim director of the museum last summer, and I was really excited to be able to do it, mainly because I had met Faye and Jonathan once, having only been here for 3 years. I call myself this kind of interloper coming into this great legacy of arts support, collecting, and a vibrant arts community here. And then given this great task and this great honor of being able to curate a fraction, a very small sampling of the incredibly generous gift that Faye and Jonathan gave to the UNM Art Museum, and also to be able to engage a little bit with this great history that many of you know, that's why you're here. And I also like to think, again, after being in these galleries again and again over the last few months, is that you also have made, and all of you up here, my job as Dean of the College of Fine Arts pretty easy, because you are part of this wonderful, rich arts community here in Albuquerque that just buoys me along in all the things that I do as the Dean of the Fine Arts here at UNM. So we wanted to have the artists speak, at least some of them, why we organized this particular panel and be able to have the collector, Faye, here with friends and artists that she's had in her collection. I just want to say a few words about Faye, but she will say a lot more. I hate to give my gloss when the actual person is sitting here, right? But most of you do know that Faye started with 2 other women, the Mariposa Gallery, in Old Town Albuquerque. And she and Jonathan were married between 1962 and 2001, and luckily they kept their collection together and were able to distribute it to a number of organizations. We are one out of 2 educational institutions that received a large chunk of their collection. And I want to read just a little bit what you have here in your CV, which I really love, and I think encapsulates what this collection is all about. Art has been an important area of my life, she says, ever since I can remember. Both my grandmothers and my mother were artists. Having children provided my most significant education. Philanthropy is a family value. I believe it is important to contribute to community. And I think that pretty much says it all, and also seeing the legacy throughout the city and beyond of your philanthropy and your love of the arts coming together kind of says more than words can say. So I'd like to now introduce Faye Abrams.
I am hooked up, and I guess I will actually stand. And so it's great. It's wonderful seeing all of you here, and several really old friends and people that I haven't seen in a little while too. So just looking around, and I'm remembering where things were hanging in the house, and trying to remember how it all started. And I was an art major at Mills College in California, and the way that the collecting started for me, and it was that one of the professors that was at the college, a man named Antonio Prieto, who taught ceramics, which I did not take, loved one of my small paintings and asked me if I would trade it with him And so I traded this small painting for a beautiful bowl, which I still have. He long ago passed away. But my grandparents were collectors. And they knew Picasso, they knew Braque, and they had wonderful art in their home. And I grew up around art. And so it was a very natural thing. When I first met John, he didn't know anything about art at all. And but he became kind of fascinated seeing the things in my mom's house and in my grandparents' house. And he then went and took an art history class when he was at Berkeley, and it was with Renoir's son. And he fell in love with art. And until we were in Boston, which is where he did his internship, we'd never bought anything. It was just my work was on the walls, and but when he started making a little bit of money, and I was teaching, the very first thing, two of the very first things we ever bought are here in the show. One is this Murau. It was from a little gallery that was owned by the wife of one of the doctors that he was working with as an intern. And the other one is the Jacques Villon, the woman holding a teacup. And they both came from a little gallery in Boston. And then we bought some other prints. We joined something called the New York Graphic Society, and they would send out a catalog every 2 months, and we would almost always buy one. And there's an Ellsworth Kelly, I don't think it's in the show, but they were like $40 to $80. So we bought a really beautiful Ellsworth Kelly for $40. And anyway, that's how we bought things that we loved. And it had nothing to do really with whether somebody was well known or not. And then we ended up in New Mexico because he had to do 2 years in the service. It was during the Vietnam War. And I was so bored at the Army base that I came to UNM and was accepted as a grad student in the art department, and they were kind of nice because I never had a portfolio, that I could do some studio art and some art history. And I was so lucky because Fred Hammersley was one of my professors. So it's really wonderful for me to sit here and look over at that piece. It's just, it was a great experience. And John and I went to a show at it was at the Unitarian Church on Carlisle, and there was a show of paintings by a man named Frank Boyden, who was on the faculty here at UNM. And we bought one. It was the first painting we ever bought, and it's the blue and yellow painting over there. So I was a student at UNM, and we bought that painting, and John said to me, "You have to go introduce yourself to that person who painted that painting and invite him to dinner." So, and I did anything that he told me to. But I was a really good wife. It was we came here in 1968. So that was 1968, 1969. Anyway, Frank and his wife Jane came over to dinner, and they looked around at some of the things that we had and said, "You have to meet this couple that have that are potters, and they live out on 4th Street." And the next day, we went out to 4th Street and we met Dick and Jenny Masterson. Jenny and I became very close friends, and they were the reasons that we stayed in New Mexico. And that brings us to my introducing the people on the panel. Because one of the first people that we met through Dick and Jenny Masterson was Richard Hogan. And you were living in Old Town at the time, weren't you? I think so. You were living in Old Town, and I don't know what it is now, but yeah, you were living in Old Town, which is also where the New Mexico Arts and Crafts Fair had started. And you and Fran were both artists. Yeah, and you had met Dick and Jenny at UNM.
Dick and I became friends the first semester, 1958, at UNM. We took a couple of classes together.
And were you all painting majors, pretty much? Yeah. Yeah, and so that was, a whole world opened up for us. I don't think John really cared he was a cardiologist it was the Sandia Base Hospital. I don't think it exists any longer. But you know, I mean, he always he was so multifaceted that he was much more interested in the being out in the community and meeting people, and I mean, he collected people as well as art, and so it was, you know, art was equally important to him as medicine, and he was a fabulous doctor as well as a great collector. Okay, and then also because of John's being in the at the hospital, he had one of the students that he met there was a very good friend of Holly's, and that's how John met Holly actually before I did, and you were a student at UNM and you were doing lithography, right? Right. Yeah. That's a sordid past? I don't think. Okay, oh, you don't want that out.
Right.
And we hardly ever met anybody who was an artist where we didn't like their work. So it was way more for us than it was about being connected with the person equally as much as it was being connected with the work that we did, and you know, and we became such good friends that people gave us things that, and I don't know if it's not in the show, but we became really good friends with Larry Bell, and when John had a big birthday, Larry gave him a huge piece. So I mean, it was amazing, and many of the things in the collection were gifts from Richard, and I know you certainly gave also. Okay, so that's Holly, and I want you each to speak about yourself a little bit, and then Betty said we were trying to remember, and Betty said that she first met me in Mariposa Gallery. It really was a wonderful gallery. It was fabulous, and pretty cutting edge for that time, and you came in 1976, and the gallery was only 2 years old at that point, and there had been another craft gallery in that same place, and then so we became friendly, and
Yeah, it was a totally different kind of craft gallery from everything else in Old Town.
that part is true. And then also because of my having been an art student and John's tendency to really want anybody that was connected with art as part of his life, we knew everybody on the faculty. And Betty was remembering who was on the faculty when she came, so Nick Abdallah was one of the people, and he was a really, really good friend too. And so I mean, that's enough about me, and you can ask questions later, but I would like everybody else to just say just a little bit about themselves. We all discovered about ourselves that we loved art and made art ourselves when we were very, very young, and were encouraged in that. Were you encouraged in it?
Yes.
Okay, so since I met you, the first of anybody else who's sitting here, why don't you go?
Yeah, I went to school at UNM, both undergraduate and graduate school. I kind of grew up in Albuquerque, and I don't remember meeting Faye at a party at Dick and Jenny's, but I do remember meeting John. Dick introduced me to him, and John immediately stepped extremely close, which I was not used to. And I think I said something about he stepped into my personal space and stayed there for a lifetime. We were invited to dinner and went out. That's where I met you, at Sandia Base, which was at the time seemed strange to me because it was the Vietnam War. Most of my friends were extremely anti-war. And I didn't know you guys yet. So, but we became close friends, and that continued. Faye also, I'm a painter, but beginning in 1974, I started a second career as a jeweler, and Faye and friends opened a gallery and became one of my major supporters in terms of my jewelry work. So I had connections there.
And I have more pieces of your jewelry than any other.
I'm sure you do. And they also acquired a large number of my pieces over the years. Most of them were purchased. So,
That's right, they were.
And as an artist who makes a living off my work, that's always been important. I need people to buy the work.
So, Holly?
Well, I thought a lot about this talk and what we would talk about. And one of the things I feel like in looking back at my relationship with John and Faye is just how stupid I was. I was a young artist. Here were these people buying my work. Well, yeah, it's great stuff, why wouldn't they? And now that I'm the age I am, I think, oh my God, these people did this wonderful thing for me. They helped me become an artist. They helped me become a professional artist that made a living from my work, that was able to feel good about what I did and support this. I mean, as artists, we're like heroin addicts. We just do what we do over and over and over. And here are these wonderful people who are giving us money to do that. And again, I feel so dumb when I was in my 30s and even my 40s. I just kind of thought, oh, well, yeah, of course people are going to collect my work, because, yeah, why wouldn't you? And now I think I have such deep appreciation for you guys. I mean, it's almost to the point of tears, feeling of what you guys represent and what you've done. And my daughter Teal was asking us earlier about the difference between a good collector and a bad collector. Well, these are good collectors. These are the good ones. These are the ones that you cherish and keep and thank and appreciate and just feel so good about. So anyway, thank you, Faye. And John. Getting too close in your space and mumbling.
And so Betty.
Yes.
So you came to be on the faculty at UNM.
Yeah, so I wasn't making my living as an artist. I don't think I could. People asked me over the years, do you sell a lot of work? And my answer's always been, I couldn't feed my cats and dogs on the work I sold. I just wasn't enough. So I had a day job, which of course I was afraid to quit. I never quit my day job teaching here at the university. And as far as being collected by private collectors, my work has never been a big favorite for private collectors. It always falls between the cracks. It's not printmaking, it's not painting, and it's not photography. And over the years, I've had quite a few people tell me that that's not photography, or that's not printmaking, or that's not this. So having a day job, I just kind of soldiered on and ignored that, kept doing what I was doing. The day job did allow me to, finance one of the IRS auditors said, she just has a hobby, that's all that is. It's a hobby. So I had to fight that, and that's not, if you're not making your living as an artist, you have a day job, that's a tricky area. And we got audited a couple times and had to keep really careful records. Another thing I've been thinking about is the kind of a conflict of interest between artists and collectors. Now, I'm really both. I am a collector. At first I was an accumulator, and then I really did become a collector. I did buy things. I bought things from galleries. And I did make sure that my collection kind of related to itself. I mean, I wasn't just buying anything. It's tempting to buy anything that looks really good and fun, but I tried to kind of keep it together, and I like that intersection of painting, drawing, and printmaking, and photography. I like that work from the 70s, and a lot of my friends were doing work like that. As far as the conflict of interest goes, it's very satisfying. It's really fun to give your work away, to give it to museums. And if you give it to a private collector, well, they're basically your friends. You're giving them a gift. There's no conflict there. It's satisfying to give somebody something. But if you give it to a museum or an organization that's doing it as a fundraiser, they're going to take your work and sell it and use your money to buy somebody else's artwork. So, and that used to bother me when I was younger. Now I'm too old to worry about it. And now I just give stuff away because I've really got too much. And I mean my own work. But I've given part of my collection away too. I've given things to this museum, not as much as you have. but I gave a dozen pieces last summer. And it's really very satisfying, kind of lightens the load. And it doesn't matter if the museum uses their money to buy somebody else's work. They probably don't have any money to collect with anyway anymore. Their budgets are cut so badly. Oh, and I gave money, and I gave work to the hospital. I've given a lot of works to the Johns Hospital collection, a lot of things. And that's very satisfying. Of all the places to have your work, that hospital is wonderful because people go in there in the worst possible situations, and every so often they come back and they say, I was visiting this friend of mine who has cancer, and I saw your picture. I saw your flower there, and it was so wonderful because it was just on the wall. And I thought that is satisfying to give away. And that hospital's not going to use money to buy other artists' work. They're just going to collect. Besides, they always do nice framing, and I like that. So,
Yeah, I want to say, John was always finding places for art. And he really, so the way the hospital collection started was really he brought pieces that we didn't have room for anymore in the house and put them up out, both started in his office, but then it migrated out into the halls in the cardiology department. And I don't know how Chris, you probably know much more how it really started, but it was certainly his idea. That's exactly how it started, but how it became a real collection with a real curator. And the other thing that he started was the sculpture garden at the Albuquerque Museum. It was just an idea, like this place should have a sculpture garden, and I forget how it all happened, but it was his idea, and he always had fabulous ideas. Not only for that kind of thing, but also for parties. We had fabulous parties, which several people probably remember. But I'm just going to mention this because the Albuquerque Museum actually has a piece from one of our parties when there was some sort of very, very restrictive law against pornography passed in Albuquerque, and John decided we should have a pornography party, and Nick Abdallah, and we had games planned and everything, and Nick Abdallah did this huge, almost life-size caricature of Nixon naked, and we had Pin the Dick on Nixon. Now, the actual things that we pinned on disappeared somehow, but the original drawing of Nick Abdallah's now is at the Albuquerque Museum. So he had fabulous ideas, and really hardly anything that he ever did I mean, he did it to the max, you know, whether it was playing tennis or skiing or collecting art or giving parties. He was a pretty amazing person. Um, so I want to go back to and have everybody talk about how their interests, I mean, how they started with being an artist and what had them pursue it enough to go to art school. I mean, every single one of us sitting up here were art majors as certainly undergraduates, and I guess, did you get an MFA? You got a BFA, and I just got a BA at Mills, but I was an art major, and I did get my master's here, but it turned out that once I had my second child, I really the whole idea of doing an MFA show or a thesis for a master's, whatever, was way too much, and I went over to art education, and I did get my master's in art ed the same year that I opened Mariposa Gallery. So I never ended up teaching. Other than as, you know, really owning a gallery, a lot of it is education. A lot of it's education. So how did it all start with you?
When I was 8 years old, I found out I could draw. And it was a surprise to me and everyone else. It was as simple as it was a classroom assignment. We were given an hour to make a drawing of anything we wanted in the third grade. And I had a textbook with a photograph of a donkey cart in Spain. And I thought, well, I'll try to draw that. And I found out I could do that. I could actually reproduce it. And that leads to a lot of attention, and I was rewarded for it, so I continued to do it. And we moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico when I was 11. And I started at UNM when I was 17, and I kind of knew nothing about what being an artist was about, but those years in school taught me a lot about that, and that's just what I've always done.
And didn't you also go to New York, like there was some sort of an idea that I'll never really be an artist unless I live in New York?
Yeah, I moved to New York in 1971. With the intention of living my life there. And I came back in 1972 after a year in New York, which was a year that taught me I was 30 years old when I moved to New York, and I realized within weeks that I should have moved there when I was 18. And my girlfriend did not like it there. Our agreement was we'd come back to New Mexico. I was trying to figure out what I was doing as an artist. I needed more time. Our plan was to go back to New York in the late 70s. And we actually went to upper state New York with the plan of moving into New York. My girlfriend left me at the end of a year. I came back here to be around close friends and recover, and I still plan to go back to New York. And I remember after I started showing with Linda Durham, she started selling everything I made. I mean, literally everything I made. I just made things, took them to her, and it disappeared. John, in late 81, suggested to me that I needed to move to New York. He said he did not think anyone could run a major career out of New Mexico, which turned out to be correct. But I was, all I ever wanted was enough money to just paint and not worry about anything else. And Linda Durham provided that for 10 years. So I never moved back to New York. I probably should have, but I have no regrets about it, in that the work I've done grows out of my experience in New Mexico. And if I had worked in New York, the work would have been different, and I have no sense of what it would have been. Friends in New York tried to get me to come back or to stay. But I used to go back a lot, but I even quit doing that for a long time. So.
And you also taught.
By the time I got out of UNM, I had no desire to teach. I won't go into it, but I had some bad experiences as a graduate student at UNM. I was actually fired as a TA. Clinton Adams and I ended up at odds, and Clinton wanted rid of me. So by the time I got out of UNM, I didn't want to teach. But John Totchell, who was a friend and one of my instructors at UNM, had a close friend who was headmaster in a private school, and I ended up teaching there for 3 years. And then I moved to New York.
My granddaughter goes there now.
Oh, okay. It's still there.
Yeah.
And I was very slow developing as an artist. It was 1977 before I found my own work. And I was 36 years old, and I had hit a point where I realized all the work I'd been doing was not mine. It was derivative of other people. And I spent a year floundering and finally found something that was mine. And I've built off that ever since.
Thank you. So Holly, did you ever teach?
Well, I teach all the time.
Oh, that's right, no, you do.
I do.
Yeah.
I teach workshops around the country, but I've never had a university position. So it's more sort of these wonderful adult art camps, you know. They provide the food. It's so fun, no grades. And people that were, when they were 8 years old, were told they couldn't draw a tree. Finally, now they're 58, and they've decided, I'm going to try it. And then they do, and they just take off. So, but I was not one of those people when I was 8 years. I was the best horse drawer at Wood Gormley Elementary School in Santa Fe, bar none. And so I'm still doing horses now,
And
50 years later.
So when did you first start drawing or get interested in?
I think it was just one of those things where I just always did it, and I always had that identity and that sense of self. And my mother wanted me to be a secretary so I could earn a good living, and I dodged that and have always managed somehow to land on my feet with doing my art. And
Just as I'm sitting here, I'm remembering one other thing. Holly's married to a doctor who's an artist, and he taught, I knew him when he was like 17 or 18 years old, I'm echoing a little bit, and he taught my kids swimming. So
it's very convoluted.
Yeah, I mean, the connection goes way back, and I think he also taught, I don't know, is Marge still here? He taught her kids too, but I found him.
And he was also John's physician, and John called him the exercise Nazi. He'd say, how's the exercise Nazi doing, you know, meaning Bob. So I always thought that was kind of great, because he kind of is an exercise Nazi. So anyway, I mean, that's what I do. You know, I think it and live it and breathe it, and it's incredibly important to me. And I now have a daughter who just graduated from art school, and much as I try to get her not to, you know, don't do it. She's a young artist, sort of starting out. So it's and then Bob does art, so it's
Yeah.
pretty wonderful.
Yeah. No, it does seem to kind of run in families. I mean, you know, both my grandmothers having been artists, but one in particular. And one of the things that she used to do is she would get a photograph of the kids doing something, but my favorite piece of hers is in my mom's bedroom. It was my first daughter's first dress, and it's just the dress, and it's wonderful, you know, and she was a really important person in my life. But there was one other question I wanted to ask you, and it escaped me, and I'll come back to it. But the part about just like, did everybody look up to your drawings of horses when you were, I mean?
Well, yes. And then in the fifth grade, there was a rodeo competition, and you won free tickets to go to the rodeo. And I just thought I was a shoo-in. I did my drawing. and then Cindy Kuzil won. So devastating. So there were ups and downs. Dick and I were just talking about the ups and downs of being an artist. You're absolutely at the top, and then there's Cindy Kuzil pushing you out the
I
door.
remember the question, because it didn't happen with you. You're known nationally, and you, do you think that you have to have lived in New York to really
Well,
have a major career as an artist?
I did something that, again, young and stupid. It just happened to be I was in the right place at the right time. My husband, as a physician, had to pay back the government for putting him through medical school. So we lived on the Zuni Indian Reservation for 8 years. And it was just a fantastic experience. And I became kind of this mysterious person. You know, I was taking photographs and doing things to them that you shouldn't be doing. And then I lived on the Zuni Indian Reservation. And the work had a definite Native American feel to it. And it put me on the map. I mean, I think being in Zuni, as much as my talent or my whatever, I think that really got people's attention. And again, I just was dumb. I just said, oh, yeah, well, that's what you do. You know, you live on an Indian reservation. But I think instead of going to New York, I think had I gone to New York, I would have been one of many. But being in Zuni and being an artist, I was one of a few. I mean, I was doing something unique in a place that was very unique. So that was my New York, 8 years in Zuni.
So it's almost like you have to sort of remove yourself from what is really familiar to be in an unfamiliar.
Exactly. It was so magical being surrounded by these people who spoke Zuni, were Zuni, and their religion was Zuni. I mean, they were totally committed to this life that I'd never known anything like. And so to witness it, to experience it, to go to the dances, to know the Zuni people, it just really shifted my eyes and turned things around. And then from there, it set me off on my career. You know, it gave me the experience and the depth to go wherever I wanted to go from there. So.
And then did you have one major gallery, the one in Tucson?
Well, no, actually, Linda Durham. Both Dick and I were with Linda Durham, and then I had different galleries around the country, and still do. You know, one in Chicago and here and there. So that sort of it's always a crapshoot. You know, don't be an artist, anybody out there.
And so it's like all three of you artists with completely different ways of that you were on the university faculty for how long?
Here for 20 years, and in Rochester, New York for 7 years.
Where you had just gotten to the point where you would have had a sabbatical, a paid
Right.
sabbatical. Do
Right.
they still do that? Do they still do paid sabbaticals?
I think they do.
Yeah?
And I just want to mention, you open up any book on current photography history, and there's Betty. She's always in any book that has to do with photography and what's happening. And she was the original let's mix it up person. I just followed in her footsteps. She abused the crap out of photography way before I did. And she's on the map. She is someone that I can say, yeah, I know Betty Hahn. Yeah, we're tight. And it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
I love that, abused photography.
Yeah, we are. We're photo abusers, I think.
I've never heard that before, but it's great.
So.
And was teaching for you, you called it a day job.
Yes.
But did you love it? Or?
I did eventually. I started out real nervous, and then I gradually got into it, and I liked the interaction. I liked that continual flow of students, and especially that continual flow of conversation. Students are interesting. College students in photography, graduate students and undergraduates are really interesting. They ask interesting questions and they do interesting work. So I definitely got into it.
Did you ever trade or acquire any of your students' art?
A few pieces, yeah. I have a few things from students. Sometimes they gave them to me. A couple times, if they were really in financial trouble, I bought them. That didn't happen too often, but the way I started collecting, when I decided this was going to be a positive mood. I bought a Rauschenberg and a Warhol from Castelli Galleries that were just published as kind of giveaways. They were offering them to museums. And when I was in graduate school, the museum got this big roll of prints. And I think they were commercial silk screens. So they weren't luscious Tamron type prints, you know, good paper and good ink. These were closer to advertising, but there was no advertising on them. It was just a print. They wanted $10 a piece for them. Well, the museum thought they were trash, and the graduate students bought them. They could afford $10 a piece. So those were the first things I collected, those two
You
things.
got a Rauschenberg and a Warhol.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you still
And-
have them?
I still have them, yes. And then from then on, I started, I did trade with some people, but I bought things from galleries, and I bought things directly from photographers. And then I did something that once in a while that was kind of a little guilt producing, and that is buying an artist work cheap from an auction, a fundraiser. And I thought, oh, that's such a low price. Now, should I buy it and give the fundraising people, you know, $50 or $100 when I know it's more, when I know it's worth more? Or should I just lay back and not do that, not be guilty? So that was one of the conflicts of interest, I thought, between being an artist and being a collector. I felt that.
Actually, that's really an interesting point, because first of all, I mean, around donating, as an artist, when you donate, you can't really get the value of your piece.
You can't even deduct it from your income
That's
tax.
what
It's
I-
just gone.
Right,
The
it's
value, you can only do
the value of the
materials.
paper and the ink
Right.
or the
Yeah,
whatever.
the paper and the ink, so that would be
Not even the-
$1.37.
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one thing, but the other thing is about auctions, and unless it's something that is worthy of Sotheby's or Christie's or something like that, there are a lot of artists' work gets auctioned off, or, you know, like for fundraisers for various things, at way less than the value, and I think that there are people who go to those things hoping
Yeah.
to find things.
Well, I've
and-
been on both sides of it now.
Yeah.
So I've donated things that went really cheap, and then I've also bought things that went
Yeah.
really cheap. But that made me
Yeah.
feel guilty.
I always told my kids that I thought guilt was a worthless emotion, but anyway, it's just
Yeah,
like,
it is, but
yeah. But, you know, I mean, it's just, and because you know what the value is, and then, but you really want the piece too. No, I don't think we ever bought anything at auction. I'm pretty sure that we didn't. You know, and that was one of the things that almost every single artist who, of the work that we bought, we knew almost every single artist personally. And well, we didn't know Basquiat, but I mean, and we didn't know Sugimoto. But I mean, other than that, pretty much the Jennifer Bartlett, I mean, John and I did not know, well, actually he did know her. She was a classmate of mine at Mills. And so I mean, even though as adults we, you know, or post-college, we never were friends. So, I mean, Nathan Oliveira, I mean, there's hardly anybody that we didn't know and weren't friends with. And which to me makes the pieces far more valuable. And it never was about looking for something that was of great value. We only bought things that we really liked. And I think that it was important to like the person too. So anyway, I think it might be, I don't know, we were supposed to get some kind of signal, but to open it, well, but we could also open it up for questions now. Yeah. So,
if you just have a question, just come, raise your hand, and I'll run over with the mic.
and you can ask anything, or we can just keep talking.
I was just wondering, I wanted to ask a question of Betty, where you got your interest to start with 19th century
Where what?
where did the interest come for 19th century photo processes like cyanotype and non-silver?
Oh, the non-silver, the 19th century photographic processes. Why was I interested in that? It came when I was in graduate school, and it was actually my design instructor who wanted everybody in the class to make a book with original work, which was no problem for the printmakers. They could print woodcuts, etchings, lithographs, and there I was. He said, I do not want tipped in photographs. I want the photographs on the book paper. And so I went to my photo teacher, Henry Smith, and I said, is this possible? And he said, yes, there are processes where you can do that. And the first one I tried was gum bichromate. And there were instructions for that in the Gazette des Beaux-Arts from 1860 in French in the library. So that was fun.
And you spoke, I mean, you could read the French?
I could, yeah, well, it's a chemical formula, so it
Right.
wasn't too hard to translate, yeah. Wasn't too bad, yeah.
Holly, you mentioned that Faye and John are good collectors, but how would you describe a bad collector?
Well, I was thinking about that, and trying to think, Holly, don't dig a deep hole you can't get out of. But, and I don't know Eli Broad. He's never collected me. But I read an article in the New Yorker about Eli Broad. Everybody familiar with who he is, a LA, California collector. And basically, I think, and again, this is terrible, because I'm just sort of grabbing stuff out of the air here, but when I finished the article, what I was left with was the sense that this man invested in artists so that he could then pump up their worth and then make money in that way. And that meant adding a museum wing onto a museum and then having shows of the artists that he supported. And to me, that it made me sick to my stomach. Bad collector, because I felt like it was all about, someone else said that that a Gerhard Richter now, when it goes up for sale, it goes for just millions and millions of dollars. And investors will put together money, buy it, and put it in a vault in Switzerland. And then in 5 years, they'll turn around and sell it. That's a bad collector to me. I mean, to me, it's about heart. It's about passion and not just loving the art, but loving the artists. We're weird people, you know, we don't quite fit anywhere. And to have this supportive, I mean, Eli Broad doesn't care about the art. I mean, again, I'm going to probably just burn in hell for this, but he wants someone he can see as a good business partner who will get the shtick. If I put this money invested in you, then you got to help me get you up. So we'll get your money. We'll get you from $10,000 up to $1 million. You know, and we're going to do that. We're going to work it that way. To me, that's a bad collector. So.
And Betty also has an answer to that question.
What a bad collector is? This happened a long time ago. I was still living in Rochester, and I got a letter from a collector in Chicago who said he was interested in buying some of my work. But he wanted to see slides, and he wanted the prices and the description and the medium and everything. Well, it took me ages, days, to get all this work photographed and labeled and whatnot. So I finally sent him a big package of slides and different captions and all this stuff, prices, everything. And he sent it all back, and he said, "Oh, I really think you can do better than this." And I thought, oh God, and I don't know what he meant exactly. Did he want another package, which I definitely was not going to do at that point. But I thought, what is this? Just tease the artist? That's a bad collector. And he was very well known, so this was just not some guy. He was a well-known collector. Bad collector.
Holly, you mentioned that here you're able to be one of a few rather than one of many. And Richard, you talked about how in New York your message would have been different than working here, that your message came out differently. Do you like the message that you came up with here? Do you like the art that you created here?
I like the work
differently
I've
than
created
you-
here, yes. I'm sensitive to my environment, so New York City is a very different place than New Mexico. If I had stayed there, I don't know what my work would have been like. My closest friend was a Brazilian artist who was a conceptualist. And working that way made more sense to me in New York than it does in New Mexico. He specifically tried to get me to stay. He said, if you go back to New Mexico, you'll make beautiful paintings, you'll have a great life, and you'll have no effect in the world. And in that sense, he was right. You know, his reputation, which comes out of Brazil primarily, he went back to Brazil eventually, is international, whereas mine is regional. And that's, you know, that's fine. I mean, it was my choice. And as I said, I like the work that I've done here. So, you know, there are times when I wish I had, and again, this was my choice, I wish I had pushed my work out into the world more. No, the work itself determines that. I don't, you know, it's not anything I have control of. It just comes out of where I am and what I do. In New Mexico, the sky, the light, the landscape, it's all very important to me. And I think it's in the work. So.
And I actually thought of one more thing before you go, and that is that it's kind of, I mean, I think that I was in a unique position because not only was I trained as an artist and was a collector, but I also owned the gallery. And Linda Durham was mentioned twice, and the role of a gallery owner really should I mean, it's extremely, extremely important. And one of the things about Mariposa that was so great is that it was the same, the way that we approached it, it had to do with a heart connection with the work and also the artist, so that it and it was a personal experience about the work than that and our valuing the work that was shown that made a difference. And there were many artists, really, really well-known artists, who did start their careers at Mariposa as craft artists, who then went on to become really pretty well-known. Zachariah and Gail Ricci are two that come immediately to mind. But that a gallery that has the kind of vision that Linda Durham had makes a huge difference for the artists. And that kind of gallery owner who shows only work that they love and of people who they value as human beings makes a really big difference.
I wanted to follow on from that a little bit, and I'd be interested in hearing each of you speak a little bit about the value of being part of a creative community. As artists, your work gets done generally in isolation, and that's a really important component of your work, but it seems like the galleries that Faye is talking about, as well as having collectors who value your work, is obviously not only financially supportive, but nurturing in other ways. Are there aspects of being in Albuquerque and part of that community that really fed you in any particular way?
For me, definitely. First it was UNM the friendships I made there. And then staying in Albuquerque after graduate school, there were a number of us who went to UNM, some of whom came from other places, and Dick Masterson, who, like myself, grew up here. We needed each other through a period of time when none of us were being paid attention to. I remember calling John Abrams, I believe in probably 1976 or I imagine 76, to tell him that Ellen Graham had just completed a series of paintings and that John needed to come look at them and buy one.
Okay, so,
And he actually came down. I don't know if you came with him.
oh, I'm sure I did.
I imagine.
I did.
And purchased one.
Yeah,
And that started a number of your friends then purchased them.
that's right.
And that kind of thing became important. And it was important knowing you guys because you were supportive of what we were doing.
And I'm trying to remember if Gloria was at that time already a potter and showing her work at Mariposa.
She was a potter showing her work at Mariposa. And
so-
she was doing functional pottery at that time.
That's right, that's right.
She hadn't moved into sculptural things.
That painting was in,
The community was extremely important in those days, and it's always important. And unfortunately, through the years, people go different ways, and it's harder to hold it together. But particularly when we were younger and trying to figure out what being an artist was, it was essential to have other people to talk to look at their work, to, you know. Another example is, when I came back from New York in 79, I was in difficult financial straits and I had to quit painting for a year. And I made jewelry, which I had a very good market for at that time, to get enough money ahead to start painting again. But when I stop working, it's often hard for me to get started back again. A lot of neuroses involved in that, a lot of fear about what I do. By the 1st of January in 1980, I had $8,000 in the bank, accumulated over the previous year, which for me at that time was a great deal of money. It meant I could paint for 6 months and do jewelry part-time. By the end of January, I had not started painting. I got a call from Ellen Graham. He said he was coming out, and I was to stay there until he got there. I lived in Corrales at that time. He showed up at my door, he walked in, and he said, "I've come out here to get you started." He said, "You've given up everything in your life to make paintings, and you're not doing it." And he said, "It's time to start." And it was just the kick I needed. I started painting that night, and in the next 6 months, I think I finished 12 paintings. And he also provided me the connection to Linda Durham. He told Linda Durham that she had to show my work. And Linda came down to look at my work. We became friends, and I took a painting up to her, and she sold it 2 weeks later, and that was it.
I think that we're sort of coming to the end, and I don't know how long this is planned for, but let's hear about the community from you two, how important it is or what, yeah.
It's my teaching, I think, that really connects me. I teach about maybe 6 to 8 weeks a year. And I just love my students, and I love watching them grow And then I love being in these communities where we're all artists. We're all part of the same tribe. We're all, however different our art is, we have this commonality. And it just feeds me so much. Because here I'm alone. I'm kind of turning into a hermit. I don't get out, I just go. And so these workshops that I do are very, very important to me. And I get so much from watching my students grow, from having relationships with them, from staying with them throughout my life, so many of them. And for me, that's it. That's the community I think I draw from. So.
Well, I've always thought it was incredibly important who you had around you to hang out with, people who were supportive. Word's kind of overused, a little beaten up, but that's what they do. They encourage you. They sometimes they understand exactly what you're doing, and it gets you moving. And I know even students do that, because sometimes I'd be stuck. I wouldn't be doing anything, and then I would go to my day job and talk to students, and I would start telling them what to do. You've got to get over that. You've got to get over yourself. You've got to just start. And I'm going, what are you saying? Why don't you do that? And I think that's always been important. And that's one of the reasons that I stuck with teaching, because I had to do what I said, a lot of the times. And but I've had great friends in all the places I've lived, whether it was in Rochester or wherever. I mean, it was just important. And I remember getting addicted to that. I was 10 years old, and I drew a picture of 2 horses. I sent it to a children's magazine, and they published this picture in this little kids magazine. It couldn't have been more than 8 by 10 inches, a small one, but I remember that. My horse picture was there, half a page, with my name and address, and I got 200 fan letters at the age of 10. And they started slowly, and the first 2 or 3 I answered, and then they got more and more, and I couldn't keep up with them. But I was addicted, and I knew how that felt, so I
That's great.
hooked.
I think that's a good note to end on.
On that note, I'm a big fan too. And so I'd like to thank all of you for participating, and I just want to close by saying the title of this show is "This Art Is Not Mine," which came up. Remember, we were at dinner with our lunch with Marge, and you said that was something that Jonathan had said.
You always said that.
Mm-hmm.
You said, I'm just a caretaker of this art.
Mm-hmm. And I feel that, I remember when you said that, I said, that's the title, because that's also how I felt. A curator, the art is not yours. We're just always putting up other people's work. I felt, again, as coming in as someone not from New Mexico, this art is not mine, but I was taking on this, again, I keep saying, this great honor to be able to present it. And I want to thank all of you for making it. This was work that Jonathan and Faye lived with. That's one of the reasons why I tried to do this little room here. And thank you for making it so we could have a chance to live with it. And thank you for giving it. So all of the people who've been able to come through this museum, hundreds a week, to be able to live with it a little bit too. And again, I thank you for your patience in tolerating me trying to recreate a little bit of a living room conversation in the spirit of this being from a private home, and also from a home that was very public in terms of people coming through and enjoying similar conversations. I'm sure we're more exciting, especially with porn involved, than we have here tonight. But maybe that's something to think about for future programming for the UNM Art Museum. We're always talking about visibility. Here in our, so thank you again. And I also want to encourage you, I know you'll be shushed out a little bit, to see some of the other shows here, because these are closing next week. The 22nd, 23rd is the last day. And, we have, like, for instance, Joyce Szabo, Dr. Szabo here curated the half of this gallery that is an homage to the collecting legacy, the acquisition legacy of Peter Walsh, our longest serving director. And downstairs is a Raymond Johnson show curated by
Fabulous.
Ray Hernandez Duran. It is quite wonderful. If you can just pop down there. And of course, our MFA show upstairs. And I see some of our MFA students here. And our wonderful print show that again folds in with this whole theme of Albuquerque and UNM, because that was curated out of an entire class on the history of portraiture and print that then ended up in that wonderful show that you see there. So if you don't have a few minutes today, please come back in the next week because all of this will be down, and we look forward to you coming back for our photo show curated by David Bram. That will be here a fraction of a second, opening June 5th with another location of it at 516 Arts. Thank you so much tonight for coming.